How does the stock market really work? When is the best time to buy or sell assets? And how much do you need to save every year to retire comfortably by a certain age? These are the questions that dominate personal finance discussions, but there's often something missing in the conversation. What about the human factor? That's right, the relationship between real people and their money is often left out. Financial journalist Morgan Housel believes this human factor is the key to understanding why people make the financial choices they do. If you want to know why some people sink into debt or squander fortunes, it's not just about interest rates. It's about understanding the human emotions of envy, greed, and optimism that drive decision-making. In this summary, we'll explore these ideas and cover some important takeaways. We'll learn how personal experiences shape investment strategies, why chasing a single Picasso might leave you with 99 failures, and how envy pushes investors to risk everything they've already achieved. Everyone has their own experience of the economy and money. We've all heard the story of the Great Depression. After the stock market crash of 1929, the global economy spiraled into a decade-long slump. In the United States, the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties came to a sudden end. Businesses went bankrupt, families lost their homes, and savings vanished overnight. Poverty soared, and optimism about the future plummeted. Today, this narrative has become the standard version of events because it reflects the experience of millions of Americans. But there's more to the story. Take John F. Kennedy as an example. When he ran for president in 1960, he was asked about his experience of the Great Depression. His answer surprised many. His family's wealth actually grew during the Depression, and by 1939, they lived in a bigger house with more servants. It wasn't until Kennedy read about the Depression in college that he realized how much others had suffered. Not all Americans were in the same boat. This applies not just to the rich and poor, but to everyone. Your experience with money and the economy is shaped by your personal circumstances. A farmer's son and a stockbroker's son don't just come from different worlds. They also learn very different lessons about risk, reward, and money management. Even people with similar wealth can have vastly different views based on their life experiences. For example, someone who grew up during high inflation will approach financial decisions differently than someone who experienced stable prices. These experiences form the foundation of how we handle money, shaping decisions we make in adulthood. We like to believe we understand how the world works, but most of us have only experienced a small part of it. And that's the first thing to remember about the psychology of money. What we think we know is often just a sliver of reality. Personal experience drives financial decision-making. Economists often assume that people make rational financial decisions, ones that maximize their personal gain. But real life is much messier. Take the lottery as an example. The average low-income household in the United States spends $411 on lotto tickets every year. At the same time, around 40% of all households struggle to find $400 for an emergency. And guess what? Many of these same households are the ones buying those lottery tickets. Is that rational behavior? Not exactly. But it's not entirely illogical either. If you're barely getting by, it's easy to feel like the lottery is the only shot at a better life. It's a long shot, but it offers the possibility of the kind of wealth that might seem completely out of reach otherwise. This is where a lot of supposedly irrational financial decisions come from. A 2006 study by economists Ulrika Malmendier and Stefan Nagel found that our personal financial histories greatly shape how we invest. They discovered that the economy's performance during a person's young adulthood influences how they approach risk later in life. If inflation was high during someone's formative years, they'd likely avoid bonds as they got older. On the other hand, if inflation was low during that time, they would feel more comfortable investing in bonds, even if inflation rose later on. The same trend applies to stock investments. If someone came of age when the stock market was thriving, they'd be more likely to invest in stocks throughout their life. But if they experienced a stagnant or declining market in their early years, they would be less inclined to invest, even if the market improved later on. Consider someone born in 1970. During their late teens and early 20s, the S&P 500 skyrocketed, increasing tenfold. Anyone who invested during that time likely made a fortune. Compare that to someone born in 1950 who saw very little movement in the market during their formative years. They might be more cautious about investing, even if the market eventually boomed. In the end, financial decisions aren't always driven by real-time data or rational calculations. They're shaped by gut feelings and personal experiences from our past, influencing us for the rest of our lives. The economic concepts we use today are still very young. Let's start with something familiar: dogs. A toy poodle may seem far removed from its wild ancestors, but if you look closely, you'll notice that instinctual behaviors, like chasing a squirrel, are still there. Despite 10,000 years of domestication, those wild traits haven't entirely disappeared. So, what does this have to do with money? Quite a lot, actually. Why do so many of us struggle with money? One reason is that, in the grand scheme of things, handling money is pretty new to humans. The first currency wasn't introduced until 600 BC by King Aliats of Lydia, an ancient kingdom in what is now Turkey. And that's nothing compared to more modern financial systems. Take retirement, for instance. Before World War II, most people worked until they physically couldn't anymore. Life expectancy was lower, but even in the 1940s, half of men over 65 were still in the workforce. Social Security started to make retirement possible, but it wasn't until the 1980s that the average Social Security check made it somewhat affordable. Think about it. The concept of retirement as we know it is less than 2 generations old. The 401k didn't even exist until 1978, and the Roth IRA wasn't introduced until 1998. Even other big ideas we take for granted, like hedge funds or index funds, are only a few decades old. Consumer debt, mortgages, car loans, credit cards, all of which have fueled massive economic growth, didn't become widespread until after World War II, thanks to the GI Bill. So, if we're not great at financial planning, it's not because we're bad at it, we're just new to the game. Luck plays a bigger role in financial success than you might think. A couple of years ago, the author asked Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Shiller what he'd most like to know about investing. His answer? The exact role of luck in successful outcomes. Luck is tricky. Most people acknowledge it plays a role in success, but it's hard to measure how much. And, frankly, we don't like attributing someone's success to blind chance. But ignoring luck in financial decision-making? That's a big mistake. Economist Bhaskar Mazumdar found that income between siblings is more closely correlated than height or weight. In other words, if your brother is rich, there's a good chance you'll be rich too, more so than sharing similar physical traits. Why? Siblings often have the same privileges and opportunities. Parents who invest in one child's education usually do the same for the others. But if you ask a pair of wealthy brothers, they'll likely attribute their success to hard work, not luck. That's human nature. When we succeed, it's because we worked hard. When we fail, we say it's bad luck. But when others fail, we're quick to attribute it to personal flaws like laziness or bad decisions. Our culture doesn't help much either. Magazines like Forbes celebrate reckless investors who got lucky but don't highlight those who went broke because the market unexpectedly tanked. When it comes to money, it's not just about knowing what works. We need to factor in randomness, luck, and chance, even if we can't fully control it. Focusing on broad patterns rather than specific cases can help you make better decisions. Bill Gates once said, "Success is a lousy teacher." What he meant is that success can fool smart people into ignoring the role of luck, making them overconfident, and that's a sure way to set yourself up for failure. So, how do you factor luck into your financial decisions? Well, here's what not to do. Don't obsess over the lives of specific individuals. When we study the ultra-successful, we often focus on the outliers, the billionaires who seem to have cracked the code. But that can lead us down the wrong path. Take John D. Rockefeller, for example. He's one of history's most successful entrepreneurs. When he was building his petroleum empire, U.S. laws stood in his way. What did he do? He ignored them. In fact, one judge said Rockefeller's business operated no better than a common thief. Rockefeller's success has shaped how we view his actions. Today, people see him as a visionary who wouldn't let outdated laws stop his innovation. But what if he had failed? We'd probably see him as a criminal who overstepped his bounds. And here's the thing, the difference between success and failure often comes down to luck. A couple of different court rulings or a shift in politics could have completely changed Rockefeller's fate. The truth is, you can't copy someone's luck. Even if you follow every move of a Warren Buffett or a Bill Gates, you can't guarantee the same outcome. So, what should you do? Focus on common patterns of success and failure. The more frequent the pattern, the more applicable it is to your life. For example, research consistently shows that people who have control over their daily schedule are happier at work. That's a broad insight you can act on, unlike the rare success stories of billionaires. Envy can make you reckless. Capitalism does two things really well: it generates wealth, and it stirs up envy. Imagine a rookie baseball player who makes $500,000 a year. By any normal standard, that's a lot of money. But if he's playing alongside a superstar like Mike Trout, who earns $36 million a year, suddenly that $500,000 feels small. And it doesn't stop there. Even high earners like Trout compare themselves to those making more. In 2018, to be among the top 10 highest paid hedge fund managers in America, you had to earn at least $340 million. So even Trout seems like small fry in comparison. There's nothing morally wrong with envy in a capitalist system, but it does have practical consequences. When is enough enough? Just ask Rajat Gupta. Gupta came from a slum in Kolkata, India, and rose through the ranks to become CEO of McKinsey. By 2007, he was worth $100 million. But for Gupta, that wasn't enough. He wanted to be a billionaire. In 2008, Gupta, who sat on the board of Goldman Sachs, found out that Warren Buffett was about to invest $5 billion into the company during the financial crisis. 16 seconds after hearing this confidential information, he called a hedge fund manager and bought 175,000 shares of Goldman Sachs. This was insider trading, illegal, but Gupta didn't care. He quickly made $1 million. By the time he was caught, Gupta had raked in $17 million in shady deals. It wasn't enough to make him a billionaire, but it did earn him a prison sentence. The lesson here? Envy leads to bad decisions, and the consequences of those decisions often outweigh any potential gains. Think of it this way: if you have an insatiable appetite, you'll eat until you're sick. And throwing up is much worse than any meal is good. In short, don't let envy push you to make reckless decisions. Know when to stop, and remember, you don't have to chase every opportunity. Trying to take it all might just leave you with more regrets than rewards. Amassing a fortune is easier than keeping hold of it. Jesse Livermore was one of the greatest stock market traders of early 20th century America. Born in 1877, he helped shape Wall Street and, by the age of 30, was worth $100 million in today's dollars. Just before the infamous stock market crash of 1929, Livermore made the best call of his career. He bet against the market, taking a short position, anticipating that stocks would tumble. And they did. The market lost a third of its value. While fortunes were wiped out and investors faced ruin, Livermore returned home with incredible news. He had made the equivalent of $3 billion in today's money. Sounds like a happy ending, right? But not quite. Remember how we said success can be a lousy teacher? After his big win in 1929, Livermore thought he was untouchable. He placed bigger and bigger bets, but this time, they didn't pay off. He lost everything, over and over again, until he was completely broke. In 1940, deeply in debt, Livermore tragically took his own life. The lesson here is that getting rich can be easier than staying rich. It's easy to see why many people who succeed at making money often struggle to keep it. Making money is about taking risks, being optimistic, and having courage. But keeping money? That's a different mindset. It's driven by fear that everything you've earned could disappear. Staying rich requires humility, too. After 1929, Livermore thought he couldn't lose, but what he failed to realize was that luck played a huge role in his success, and that kind of luck isn't something you can always rely on. Livermore's story isn't unique. In fact, around 40% of all publicly listed companies eventually lose their entire value. Even the Forbes 400 list of America's richest people has a 20% turnover every decade, excluding deaths or family transfers. So how do you keep what you've earned? In a word, perseverance. The most successful entrepreneurs are those who stick around for the long haul without wiping out. They share one thing in common: a healthy dose of fear. As billionaire venture capitalist Michael Moritz says, when you're scared of losing, you approach potential gains from a different perspective. Most wins aren't worth the risk of losing everything. And when you adopt that mindset, you're more likely to make better decisions. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Heinz Berggruen didn't have a promising start. Forced to flee Nazi Germany in 1936, he wasn't sure what his future held. After studying literature at the University of California, Berkeley, he worked as a journalist and part-time art critic. In 1940, he bought a small watercolor painting by Paul Klee for $100. That purchase marked the beginning of what would become a lifelong passion for modern art. Fast forward to the 1990s, and Berggruen was one of the world's most successful art collectors. In 2000, he sold his collection to the German government for €100 million. The collection, which included masterpieces by Picasso, Klee, Matisse, and Braque, was worth far more, an estimated $1 billion. It was one of the most significant collections of modern art in the world. So, how did Berggruen build such an impressive collection? Was it skill or luck? Well, according to investment firm Horizon Research, there's a more interesting answer. Their research shows that great collectors, like Berggruen, follow a common strategy: they buy a lot of art. Some pieces turn out to be valuable investments, especially if held onto for a long time, while many others are essentially worthless. The trick, according to Horizon's report, is to hold on to the successful pieces long enough that the overall value of the collection eventually reflects the worth of its best pieces. Berggrun's collection was like an index fund. His investments were spread across a wide range of artworks. Instead of only buying what he liked or admired, he bought as much as he could. Over time, a few key winners emerged. This strategy applies to all investments. It's known as the long tail, the idea that a small number of events account for the majority of outcomes. In simple terms, getting a few things right can more than make up for getting a lot of things wrong. Failure is inevitable, but what really counts is the impact of your successes. Put differently, when you've got a Picasso in your collection, you don't need to worry about the 99 duds you also bought. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.